right, everyone. Good morning. This is Shane Kiso, Vice Chair for this committee. I am standing in for Carl this morning. So I'd like to call the meeting to order, but to do so, we'll need to do a roll call. So Ms. Herrera, if you'd be so kind to do the roll call for us this morning, get us going.
Sure. Please unmute when I call your name and indicate your attendance. Carrie Wilcoxon. Shane Kiso.
Here.
Ward Stanford. John Willett. Raymond Huang.
I'm here.
Nick Russo. Chris Solis.
Present.
Aaron Pinkerton.
Present.
Tony Abo.
Present.
Matthew Reeg.
Here.
Woody Skelton. Rodolfo Lopez. Or Rudy.
Present. I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Mazen Muradovic.
Present.
Ryan Hudson.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Brandon Forey. Tara Harmon. Mohammed Youssef. David Smith.
Here.
Thank you. Dana Oziani.
Good morning, I'm here.
Good morning. Kathy Hollow.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Adrian Ruiz. Jeff King. Robert Gray. Captain David Cates. And Alberto Gutier. It looks like with those responses, Mr. Vice Chair, we have quorum.
All right, very good. Thank you, Margaret. So I'll call this meeting to order. Virtual meeting of our MAG Transportation Safety Committee meeting. All meeting attendees should enter as muted. Few phone-only attendees will need to press *6 to unmute at the beginning of the meeting unless they are subsequently muted by the host. Please remember to mute when you are not speaking as we move forward today, just to help create a positive experience for all in attendance. Make sure we get through our business. So we'll move on to the second item on the agenda, and that's the approval of the minutes. Approval of the minutes we're looking at is for the Transportation Safety Committee virtual meeting held on July 20th, 2021. Does any member of the Transportation Safety Committee have any comments or revisions at this time for the July 20th meeting? Please go ahead and unmute yourself and be recognized if there are any changes or comments. All right, I'm not hearing any, so can I have a motion from a committee member to recommend approval of the July 20th meeting minutes?
This is Carrie. I so move.
Thank you, Carrie. Do we have a second for the needed second?
Yeah,
This
I
is
did.
Mohammed Yusuf, second.
Okay, great.
Great. Get that, Margaret?
Yes, I did. I did Carrie making the motion and Mohammed seconding.
Okay. All right. So I think that is the, or we do have a motion, we do have a second. So let's move forward with the vote. So those all in favor will say aye, and those that say opposed could say nay, and then please say abstain if you abstain. And then Mrs. Herrera, if you could take a roll call to get those votes.
Sure. Carrie Wilcoxon, how do you vote?
Aye.
Shane Kiso, how do you vote?
Aye.
Ward Stanford, how do you vote? John Willett?
I'm sorry, Margaret. This Ward, I abstained since I wasn't at previous meetings.
Okay, thank you. John Willett? Raymond Huang?
Aye.
Nick Russo? Chris Salas,
Aye.
Aaron Pinkerton,
Aye.
Tony Abbo,
Aye.
Matthew Reed,
Aye.
Woody Skelton, Rodolfo Lopez,
Aye.
Mazin Miradovich,
Aye.
Ryan Hudson,
Aye.
Brandon Forey, Tara Harmon, Mohammed Youssef,
Aye.
David Smith,
Aye.
Dana Oziani,
Aye.
Kathy Hollow,
Aye.
Adrian Ruiz, Jeff King, Robert Gray, Captain David Cates, Alberto Gutier. Mr. Chair, the motion passes with one abstention.
Right, thank you. So meeting minutes from July 20th passed, so we'll move on to the next agenda item. And that is the call to audience. Our next members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting through the MAG website. Comments may be sent at any time leading up to the meeting, but must be received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under the MAG's jurisdiction that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. I believe we might have at least 2 public comments. So if so, Margaret, if you could please read them at this time.
Yes, we have received comments for this agenda item and I will read those now. This is from Corey. Begin comment. Jackrabbit at the I-10 needs a light. I have to take Verado Way and go all the way around to Arroyo Seco for safety to get home safely. End comment. Comment number 2 from Cindy. Begin comment. The traffic issues on Jackrabbit are out of control. From Indian School to the north of Yuma to the south. End comment. That completes our call to the audience comments. Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Margaret. I understand that the committee does not have to comment or speak to those comments, so we will move forward to I think it is item 5. So we do have a little change of agenda. We're going to be moving the program manager's report, item number 4, to later in the docket. So we'll move to item number 5 at this time. Item number 5 is the update on the development of the new regional transportation plan. This item is on the agenda for information. On June 23rd, 2021, the MAG Regional Council approved the Regional Transportation RTP Investment Plan, which represents the final list of projects and programs funded through the anticipated extension of the dedicated county transportation sales tax and other sources. On July 28th, 2021, MAG Regional Council approved the freeway, highway, arterial, and high-capacity transit project phasing, along with the plan's formal entrance into air quality conformity analysis. MAG Transportation Planning Program Manager Audra Kester Thomas will provide a presentation on the status and next steps. And I think we have Audra online and able to connect with us this morning. So I'll pass it on to Audra if she is ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Safety Committee. Pleased to be invited to speak with you today to give you an exciting update in the associated development of our next long-range regional transportation plan, as mentioned in the introduction, that really codifies decisions made, really culminating in the last 2 years, but certainly this summer with the approval of an investment plan that would be supported by an extension of the dedicated half-cent sales tax first established in this county back in 1985. I'm going to run through these slides and certainly be open to any questions at the end of my presentation. Next slide. I'm going to talk a little bit about our performance-based planning process, talk a little bit about what's included in the proposed investment plan, and then talk specifically about the intersection of our recent planning work with federally required documents for which MAG, as the designated metropolitan planning organization for this region, are required to develop. That's specifically the regional transportation plan and transportation improvement program, and being in a non-attainment area, our air quality conformity analysis, and then moreover, our next steps. Next slide. So we'll first talk about building momentum, which is our long-range blueprint for our future. Next slide. This is the graphic depiction of our almost 18 months in the making performance-based decision-making process. We are required by federal and state statute to use a performance-based evaluation process to make the determinations of future project and program investments in this region. You'll see here, starting from a full needs catalog all the way to project and program development that landed this summer. Next slide. We initially developed 4 different scenarios, 2 different concepts, each at 2 different funding levels: a continuation of the half-cent dedicated sales tax here in Maricopa County, plus the federal and state funds that do come by way of this region, but also 2 scenarios at 1 cent of a sales tax. It's important to realize that all other counties in the state of Arizona already have the authority to go to their voters for up to 1 cent of a dedicated sales tax. Maricopa County does not have that authority. We are limited at a half cent, and then have distinct and several additional provisions that are archived in state statute that limit and determine how and what we need to do with that funding. We presented these 4 different scenarios to our policymakers to do a few things. One, illustrate that we have a variety of different choices, certainly some competing needs in this region. We have documented over $90 billion of demonstrated transportation need in this region. We do not have that in terms of available revenues. So we felt it was really important to illustrate these options and use this as a decision support tool. Next slide. After going through and doing some public involvement as well, working with our policymakers, specifically through the Transportation Policy Committee, which is a statutorily determined committee here at MAG for the sole purpose of developing our regional transportation plan. They gave us the direction at the end of May, at least for a starting point, to use the system optimization half-cent scenario we developed. One of the guiding principles of this scenario is the intent to squeeze out more operational value, diversify our funding portfolio through expanded and new programs to the region, and also identify ways that we can maximize mobility benefit, perhaps more through bus-based transit versus rail-based transit options, just as an example. So using that as a starting point, the direction we received is to go back out to our member agencies, see if there were any missing priorities or projects from that scenario. And they gave us license to consider a tax rate above a half cent if necessary, or perhaps extending the term of the tax. We have twice had a 20-year tax, so we were given the authority to consider not necessarily changing the cash flow, but extending a commitment to different funded projects. Next slide. We came back after the Memorial Day holiday with 2 alternative scenarios, one at 0.6 of a cent for 20 years, and another continuing the investment at a half cent, but for a 25-year duration out to the year 2050. Next slide. And the direction we received from our policymakers was that was the scenario they preferred. TPC unanimously recommended in June, and then Regional Council subsequently unanimously endorsed that investment plan. And then we worked our mayors through the summer and into July with the final element of the technical process required for our conformity analysis, which is project phasing for those high capacity projects. And then ultimately TPC unanimously recommended and Regional Council unanimously approved that phasing and entrance into air quality conformity. Next slide. So what is included in the investment plan? Next slide. As mentioned, the sales tax is probably the piece that gets the most featured focus here in this region, but it's important to remember when we go through this effort, we put all available revenues to the region as part of this portfolio. So the sales tax for 25 years from 2026 to 2050 extended at that half cent It's projected to bring into the region about $19.5 billion. That makes up about 50% of the available revenues. You'll see here included then is our share of the Highway User Revenue Fund, as well as the federal formula funds that come for our freeway, highway, as well as transit system. Totals approximately $36.7 billion. Next slide. You'll see here the composition of the discrete projects that ultimately landed in this approved investment plan. You'll see a lot of arterial projects near and dear to your hearts, but I want to focus a little bit on the more high capacity projects. Completion of the HOV network, important DHOV connections and system interchanges. You'll notice a reconstruction of the I-17, some of our original infrastructure in the region. Corridor optimizations of two facilities, also original to the region, but limited in their footprint, the US 60 Grand as well as Superstition freeways. You'll see the SR30, decades in the making in terms of commitment, full freeway facility from the Durango curve out to the Loop 303 and then in term out to SR85. Build out of the SR30 in the Southeast Valley. Important continuation of our high capacity transit program, including 2 extensions of light rail to the west, 2 extensions of the soon to open streetcar starting in Tempe and extending into Mesa. Another product we're really excited about, bus rapid transit. We have not invested in that in the region. Provides a lot of the same operational value as light rail, but at a fragment of the cost of a rail component, but also it added a little bit of flexibility. Next slide. But what's really important and often doesn't get top billing from our perspective is the set aside for program investments MAG has as part of Proposition 400, as you are all very well aware, set aside some funding for some really important programs established here at MAG, including safety and ITS. We want to continue and expand this investment. We also see a programmatic approach quintessential to our flexibility into the future, recognizing that we have 25, 30 years worth of committed funding that certainly the future looks different than it will today. And we want to be able to be nimble and flexible, but also at the same time providing assurances to our voters as well as our elected officials about those big high capacity projects we want to invest. Next slide. So what you'll see here is those featured programs, active transportation, setting aside funding for not just a continuation of established investments we've made here at MAG, but really expanding this program, helping to protect some of our most vulnerable users of the system, our bicyclists and pedestrians, continuation of our air quality mitigation strategies at MAG, expanding and diversifying our arterial program suite, recognizing we need to still continue to expand the grid system, but also recognizing, depending on where you are in the region, reimagining what that grid system looks like and its purpose for mobility, but also the need for reconstruction may vary across our very large and diverse region. Continuation of bus transit support. It's important to realize here in this region, we have a regionally branded, but largely locally funded transit system. The region does contribute some to operations funding, but more so ultimately in the capital component, we are expanding a little bit the regional support for the regional elements of bus transit that are so important to connecting us across communities. You'll see here emerging technology, setting aside funding for those innovations, technologies, new solutions into the future that we just don't know of today, and protecting that investment so that in 5, 10, 30 years from now, our regional council can make the appropriate decisions on what those smart investments look like. ITS and safety, as mentioned, continued an expansion of this commitment, supported by some of the work this committee certainly has already done in terms of justifying that continued investment. And also TDM, or Transportation Demand Management, recognizing that in some cases our freeway capacity is at its maximum build out. We will continue to experience congestion as we continue to grow, and we'll need to find new solutions and alternatives to squeeze out more capacity and operational value out of the capital investments, and not just plan for and construct capital investments to use at the peak hour of the day. Next slide. You can learn more online. We've updated and will continue to add information to our website. This is a dynamic screenshot of a dynamic map that we have where you can zoom in and out and learn a little bit more about where these projects land. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the intersection of this particular planning effort with the required documents and processes as an MPO we must go through. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we are required to develop 2 documents, a regional transportation plan and a transportation improvement program. An RTP by federal statutes, a long-range vision focused on those regionally significant investments of how we move people and goods efficiently throughout our region. It must have a horizon year of at least 20 years, and it focuses on those regionally significant projects and programs. A transportation improvement program is more of a near-term list of projects focused on those discrete elements of investment that are regionally significant, regardless of funding source over the next 4 years. By definition, it also serves as the first 4 years of a regional transportation plan. Both of these documents must be performance-based, and we need to define and justify that performance-based evaluation in the decision-making process. They need to be fiscally constrained. We need to prove that we have available revenues to invest in and fund the projects outlined. Both need to be updated at least every 4 years, although by MAG practice, that's been roughly every other year that we've gone through and updated the documents. And they reflect all funding sources. And this is the part that gets tricky. Our focus this and what I've just presented has been on the investments plan for the extension of Proposition 400. So that's the years 2026 to 2050. We now have to take a step back and with these documents layer in other funding programs that cover the entirety of our planning area, which also extends into Pinal County. So that's picking up the committed funded projects out of Proposition 400, of course, the extension work that I've just presented, Pinal County's RTA projects within our planning area, as well as any wholly locally funded projects, notably would be, say, through Phoenix's T2050 program, where they're investing in locally funded high capacity transit. And then both of these documents, the programs and projects contained herein, have to meet air quality conformity. Next slide. You'll see here that intersection and overlapping about our funding versus our planning element, recognizing this can be confusing, especially since our focus really has been on the future investment work and the extension of Proposition 400. Next slide. Talk about some of our immediate next steps. Next slide. We do have out for review right now our final regional transportation plan, transportation improvement program, and air quality conformity analysis. Those 3 draft documents are in their final 30-day public review through October 13th. We'll then package any public comment and bring that through for regional council consideration by the end of the year. Next slide. You'll see here our intent is then to bring for adoption the RTP tip as well as conformity through our policy committee process, starting in November with management committee and transportation policy committee consideration, and then hopefully culminating in a bit of a celebratory event December 1st for regional council consideration. We would expect the feds to give us a finding of air quality conformity soon within the new year. Next slide. So largely, though, our focus has now shifted to enabling legislation. As I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we do have to go to the state legislature to receive the authority to ask our voters locally for a continuation of this important dedicated funding source. No other counties in the state have to do that, but we do. We are currently writing that enabling legislation, working with our member agencies, as well as our legislative partners who will help sponsor this legislation and hopefully shepherd it through quickly and efficiently through the legislative session early next year so that we can put a continuation of the dedicated half-cent sales tax on Maricopa County voter ballots next November 2022. Next slide. So it's a quick presentation. I talked intentionally fast to get through that content, and certainly am open to any questions that you might have. You'll see here pictured our June Transportation Policy Committee meeting led by Mayor Gallego, who really shepherded this process through her tenure as TPC chair. Can't thank you enough from a staff perspective in helping get your elected officials prepared over the course of the last several months to make some really consequential decisions. As I've mentioned, we have over $90 billion of justifiable transportation need in the region. We only have $36.7 billion in available revenues to the region. And so tough choices had to be made. I think we're proud that we've landed with unanimous decisions and look forward with a successful vote next year to then rolling up our sleeves and determining what the new programs, notably for safety or ITS, look like for our future. So with that, so Chairman, members of the committee, I stand ready to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Audra. So committee members, any questions for Ms. Kester Thomas?
Mr. Chair, this is Margaret. I just remember one question that actually came through when we sat down and had an agenda item to accept the safety plan, actually, the transportation safety plan. And that was actually from our chair. So I thought I'd relay it today since he is out sick. And that is, you know, what the projects that outreach that you did last year that combined into that catalog of 1,300 plus projects, how does that translate as it relates to safety into the number that we saw earlier, the 250? How does that translate into that number?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, Ms. Herrera. So a couple of points. We did have that performance-based evaluation process. As noted, we started with over almost 1,400 different ideas, projects submitted by you and members of your staff at member agencies, and totaling well over the available funding need in the region. We separated and sorted out those projects into potential programs, but then also to discrete projects across our three key modes, highway, freeway, arterial as high capacity transit. There were only a handful of discrete high capacity transit projects that went through a distinct and different evaluation from a systems perspective. But for the freeway, highway, and arterial projects, we did go through a quantitative evaluation, again, as required by the feds, leveraging some of those discrete data points that we use in developing our federal targets as well. We used crash rates in particular from a safety perspective as part of the formula for both arterial and freeway evaluation, guided by the direction in terms of weights from our policymakers. For anyone who's interested in reviewing that, what we call step 2 evaluation as part of the process, I'm happy to forward that or share that with you. That occurred early in the year in the February timeframe. And it was used as an opportunity to kind of sort the better performing projects from maybe the less better performing projects. And we used a threshold, a cut line, if you will, where we moved forward the better performing projects into that scenario planning process, left behind those that were lower performing for future consideration. I would say, as an aside, one of the values of going through the call for projects, getting all these ideas, is we developed internal at MAG a really robust database that we hope in future iterations as part of our calls for projects and kind of modernizing them through an online infrastructure, that we have and warehouse, if you will, these project ideas into the future, that even if they're not necessarily selected in a funded program, in a year or two, if there's a call for project, that idea doesn't fall away or disappear. And as a member agency, you have the ability then perhaps to select that project that once fed into a call for projects, or perhaps through our RTP call for projects, identify it, maybe update the information as necessary, and then submit it if and when new funding or a call for project becomes available. In terms of the programmatic investments, we took the size and scale of submissions to help in part with that decision, but also the direction from our policymakers, and if applicable, the size of the existing program already at MAG relative to our future outlook. So you'll see that in terms of safety, for example, we've set aside $250 million, right, for the continuation or expansion of the safety programs already established at MAG. And so once and if and when we become successful at the ballot box, next November, subsequent to that, our focus will then turn on program development. The Prop 400 era programs fall away, and we'll be working to develop the new generation of programs under those funding sources into the future. So we have several hurdles we have to still accomplish. This has been a big summer for us, but certainly much more work ahead in the years, not just next year, but into the future.
Thank you, Audra.
Any further questions for Audra?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Mohammed Yusuf, Town of Queen Creek. I have a question for Audra.
Go ahead, Mohammed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Audra, as always, excellent presentation. Thank you so much for that. There is a lot of variables here, in near future, the ride sharing, the smart city initiative, the remote work, the infrastructure package. Are the program flexible enough to change a project in the future or funding, given that if we have additional funding? I know the number, I believe, is 36 to 42. That's half of what we actually want. So is the program has flexibility to change a project due to the changed landscape of what we coming to?
Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee, Mr. Youssef, really great question. It's a cornerstone, I would say, of this plan development is flexibility. Our policymakers feel just like you do, that things may change, especially realizing that program I just reviewed, that funding won't be available even if we're successful until the year 2026 and beyond. And certainly there's immediate pressures perhaps all of you are facing at your local level. Indeed, there is. And I think that's an overriding in our, fundamental principle. One of the things that we're doing as part of, or at least attempting to do as part of our enabling legislation, is carving out some of what we call firewalls that exist as part of Proposition 400 out of state statute, so that if and when a change needs to be made, that's done at the regional council level where the local decisions and investments are being made. We want to be deliberate. We don't want to make it easy if we need to change or pivot, but we have an established process that will take time with public review and consideration, as well as performance justification for those changes. Certainly, if you're familiar with the Arterial Lifecycle Program or ALCP of today, you know that there is an established protocol for project changes, for when and things change over time. Those will still be fundamental to some of the programs that are established at MAG. But we also know that things do change, right? You go back and look at the Prop 400 program in 2003 as approved compared to today. Certainly we had a huge funding fall off with the Great Recession, but also we saw priorities change. So we do have established process. We use that in a transparent fashion at MAG to make sure that if and when something needs to pivot or change, that our regional council, in cooperation with the Transportation Policy Committee, has that authority and power as the metropolitan planning organization for the region.
Thanks, Audra. Appreciate it.
Any final question before we let Audra go? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to item 6. Thank you so much, Audra. Great presentation, great execution. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
All right, moving on to item 6, safety performance target setting. This item is on the agenda for information, discussion, and possible action. The 2016 Federal Highway Administration final rule on road safety performance stipulated 5 specific road safety performance measures by which the states and the MPOs must establish targets and report on performance. Adot reported the state's established performance targets for calendar year 2022 back in August 2021. Adot Safety Program Manager Mona Englund-Swick will provide a review of the established safety performance targets for Arizona as reported to the FHWA. MEG staff will provide information on safety performance projections using MEG region crash data. So yeah, I guess this is Mona, if she's connected with us here today.
Actually, Mr. Chair, we had a little bit change in staff this morning, and Carrie will be providing this presentation.
Carrie, great, thank you.
All right, we ready to go? Okay, thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, Margaret, members of the committee. My name is Carrie Wilcox. I'm the State Traffic Safety Engineer. Mona would be normally presenting this, but she had a emergency this morning, so She asked if I could step in for her. As was stated, since about 2016, all states have been required to develop safety targets. They're actually more projections, the way we set them in Arizona. And so we call them safety projections for where our fatal, serious injury and non-motorized fatal and serious crashes are going to be headed in the coming year. Arizona, like about a third of the states, bases our projections on crash trends as documented by our crash records group. Next slide, please. So for this next coming year, 2022, we are projecting, or actually from the previous year, 2020, we saw an increase of almost 8% in fatalities, including we also saw nearly a 14% reduction in our serious injury crashes, which I just want to note is the lowest that we've seen in the past 2 decades. Non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries declined, even though fatalities on pedestrians increased. This year so far, as of June 2nd, our fatalities were at 408. The most recent update this past Monday, they are actually at 810, so almost twice the number they were in June. Our serious injuries are at 1,066 as of June. Statewide vehicle miles traveled and crash data for 2020 are preliminary and subject to change. Next slide, please. So we like to take a look at our projections based on where we are in the previous year. So as of June of this year, our numbers for fatalities were there in the gold column. We had an annual number of fatalities for 2020. 1,057 at that time. I believe that's dropped to 1,054 as of today. And our 5-year rolling average of fatalities is just under 1,000. These are the numbers. These are numbers that are we haven't seen since the Great Recession of around 2006, 7, and 8. Serious injuries again continue to decline. The rate of fatalities, the rate of serious injuries were also the rate of fatalities went up last year, and the rate of serious injuries went down. And non-motorized fatal and serious injury crashes were also down slightly. So based on the baseline numbers we used for 2020, we were able to come up with projections for 2022. We are at this point projecting that we will see a continued rise in fatalities. We're actually expecting a 2% increase over this current year to 1,100 fatalities. And the fatality rate, we are also expecting that will increase as well by about 2%. Although based on the trends in VMT, we believe the VMT now is headed back upwards. This may actually give us a lower rate. Serious injuries, we are expecting that both the rate and the absolute numbers will continue to decline in 2022. And the non-motorized fatal and serious injury crashes, injuries deaths will also decline by about 1%. So these are our projections as of June. We are submitting these as of, I believe, tomorrow with our HSIP annual report. Next slide, please. And you can see here sort of the 10 or 15-year trend in the fatalities. They dipped as of 2011 to historic lows, actually 2010 to historic lows, and they've been slowly coming up. They actually dipped in 2019 as well, but 2020 saw a pretty remarkable increase. And there are lots of work being done on trying to figure out exactly why that is. Next slide, please. The fatality rate also, while it's been dampened by the changes in vehicle miles traveled throughout the state, it is also on the increase. And as we mentioned, we're expecting that it will increase next year. Next slide, please. Serious injuries are headed down. And even though the graph only goes to 2005, as I mentioned, these are the lowest number of serious injuries that we've seen in the past 2 decades, likely beyond that as well. This has to do with a lot of the features and improvements in vehicles, but also a lot of the resiliency that we're adding to our roadway system. Next slide, please. The serious injury crash rate is also headed down, and we're expecting another good year with this as well. Next slide, please. The non-motorized fatal and serious injury crashes, we're also expecting it to go down by 1% in 2022, even though the number of fatalities, especially for pedestrians, continues to be a concern to everyone on the committee. The total non-motorized fatal and serious injury crash numbers are headed in the right direction. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? As I said, we the state are required to develop and submit these projections every year. And we've done that since 2016. We are submitting ours at the end of this month with our annual report. And then at that point, all of the MPOs and COGs have approximately 180 days, exactly 180 days, to either agree with our projections, even though they're statewide, or come up with their own projections and develop their own way of tracking it. This is a requirement that the MPOs and COGs state their projections to us. It is not a requirement that they come up with their own, and it's very difficult for MPOs and COGs to do that. We recognize that. Also, whether an MPO or COG meets or does not meet their projections, or whether the state meets or doesn't meet their projections, it doesn't affect the eligibility for HSIP funding or other state or federal funding. If the state misses one or more of our projections, then we are required to do a little bit extra follow-up. We are required to come up with a statewide plan on how to get back on track. And also, we would spend a little bit more money, federal money, on state safety projects. But as of today, our projections have been historically fairly accurate, and we've never been in that position before. Next slide, please. We recommend that Adot, or that the MPOs and COGs adopt the safety performance targets, simply because it is much easier to adopt the targets than it is to develop your own. Next slide, please. The state, if the state, as I mentioned, if the state meets or does not meet or makes significant progress towards meeting targets on 4 out of 5 of these projections, again, we are required to dedicate more federal dollars to safety, which we are already doing. And we are also required to submit an implementation plan for how we're going to get back on track. But as I said, we have not been in that position since we started reporting our targets. Next slide, please. As of today, as of June of this year, we are on track to meet all of our projections that we established back in 2019. So we believe that we're in a good position, even though the targets themselves represent very serious public safety concerns. Next slide, please. there are a couple of things that we are required to do as far as the accuracy of these numbers. And you'll notice there's significant figures vary depending on which measure you're looking at. I don't know that it's important for this group. Other than that's why we don't have a common significant figure on our targets. Next slide, please. And then the MAG projections, I believe these are your projections, Margaret?
Yes, Carrie. Actually, Mohammed can speak to these.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, member of the Transportation Safety Committee, and Margaret. So these are the 2022 safety projections that were developed by MAG using the 2020 actual data that we have available. Just a note here that for developing these rates, especially the fatality rates and the serious injury rates, we use the MAG region VMT, and the 2020 VMT that we have used for coming up with these projections were adjusted due to the COVID aberration of the VMTs. So we did assume that the VMT in the MAG region came back to normal in 2020 level, close back to normal, and based on those, we came up with our 2022 VMT and then calculated the rates. Just to give you a note about how we came up with our VMT because of the COVID situation. So what we found from our 2020 actual numbers reported is that, as Kerry was telling, we see an increase in the fatalities. As you can see, 7.6%. We also see an increase in the fatality rate, 23.5%, and the serious injury rate and the non-motorized numbers, fatalities. We see decline in all of those three metrics in the MAG region. When we calculated the 5-year average using 2020 as the baseline, we found that the latest 5 years average with actual data, we had an increase of 2.3% compared to the previous 5-year average for fatalities. And then we had a 3.7% increase in the 5-year average fatality rate compared to the previous one. And the rest of the three matrix, not rest of the three, the two of the three matrix, the serious injuries and the serious injury rates had a decline in the 5-year average rate, and the total number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injury had a 0.2% increase compared to the previous 5-year average. And when we go to the 2022 projection, we can see that we find that when we are considering the annual numbers, we see that we have a decline for all of the 5 matrix in the MAG region. And more prominently, we can see that the serious injury rate and non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries experiencing higher magnitude of decrease in terms of percentage on an annual basis. And when we consider the 5-year average using this projected rate for 2022, we also see decrease in all 5 matrix. As you can see, 4% for the fatalities, 5.8% for fatality rate, and 14.7% in number of serious injuries, 15.7% for serious injury rates, and 9.9% for the total numbers of fatalities and serious injuries for non-motorized users. One point to note here is that, when we came up with our projections, as Kerry was mentioning, we also used crash trend, but we did use the crash trend for the latest 3 years to come up with our rates, the rate of increase or decrease. So that's why you may see the representation of those 3 years of crash trends translating into decrease in the number of crashes or the number of fatality rates or the serious injury rates. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Right, do we have any further questions for Mr. Wilcoxon or Mohammed?
I have a question. This is Mohammed Yusuf.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Kerry, there is a significant difference between the fatality rate that the Adot has and the fatality rate that MAG has. You're talking about 10% difference, and the delta of the injury rate is about 14%. So that's a huge gap between both projection. Is any explanation for that? Kerry or Mohammed?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you.
It's a great question, and these are really the first time I've seen these numbers, at least the MAG numbers. So I'm not entirely sure what all went into those numbers, so I can't really comment. I can say though that just based on what was presented, we've been using the 5-year trends, and that may show a little stronger upward tally or upward trajectory than the MAG trends. Having said that, though, we also tend to be a little bit more conservative with our numbers, so ours may tend to be a little bit harsher. But again, I don't know all of the thought processes that went into the MAG region. We do typically, when we present these statewide, we do typically mention that the trends in the state are to a large extent driven by the MAG region. So I am hoping that these numbers turn out to be correct, more correct than ours. Actually, we'd all like to see them to be 100% reduction. But they're certainly looking at a smaller region and a smaller date range for trend analysis.
Yes, Kerry, this is Mohammed. Just would like to comment that, also the difference in the rate that you see, Adot typically use data from the HPMS source. In our case, when we calculated the rate, we used our own in-house modeled VMTs. And as I mentioned, like there was significant adjustment for the 2020 VMT. And there was some assumption that the 2021 VMT went back to normal, to pre-COVID level. And we basically came up with our 2022 VMT, assuming that it was pre-COVID level. So that may be one of the other reasons that the rates are differing between ADOTs and MAGs, to such an extent.
Thank you.
This is Mohammed again. I think we should have some kind of disclaimer, for other community looking at that. If you have so significant difference like that, maybe do you think that part of the difference is Adot predict statewide versus MAG predict Maricopa County? That's probably why, but still, the gap is huge. And if we're gonna represent that somewhere else, it will be contradicting. So I think that we should add some statement to each one prediction. Maybe it's different sources of prediction. At the end of the day, it's a projection for the 2022. Just leaving it the way it is, I think that need to be adjusted.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. The only numbers that get reported to the state, or excuse me, to the federal government, are the statewide numbers. And our methodology. As mentioned, though, and we are doing it for the entire state. Some of the problems that I can imagine come up in the past when NPOs and COGs have adopted these projections is it looks like people are accepting of the numbers that are being represented there, and adoption is not acceptance. But also we do, and the federal government allows the MPOs and COGs to develop their targets, their own targets or own projections. based on their own methodology. So to your point, I think so long as the methodology is spelled out when MAG sends these, adopts and sends these targets to projections to Adot, that would be fine, but they won't be published as far as the federal government. And it will be with the understanding that MAG developed them with their different assumptions than the Adot.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Also, Kerry and Mohammed, just wanted to mention about the crash trend that Kerry was mentioning. So in our 2022 projections, as you can see, we have a decrease in fatalities and other metrics. We use basically crash trends for the year 2018, 19, and 2020, whereas in Adot's case, 5 years of crash trends were used dating back from 2016 to 2022. So that may be another reason for the differences that you see here.
Thank you.
This is Kathy Hall. If I could follow up, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I just even though this doesn't get sent to the federal government, the whatever is going to be sent differently to the federal government, this is now a public document, right? That other staff and elected officials and all can see. So I think Mohammed's idea of some kind of a footnote or something with a little more explanation is probably a good one.
Sure. Catherine, this is when these are adopted, or if they're adopted and forwarded on, they will have to explain, MAG will have to explain its methodology, and that'll be in the document. But if you did want to put, or if MAG did want to put in a couple of specific footnotes to this chart, that'd be fine, but it should be part of the entire submission.
Got it. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Safety Committee, this is Margaret, just to kind of add to the conversation. We typically provide these for information purposes for the committee, although points are very well taken with putting an additional note here. These do not go to ADOT. This is just for our information. And so when we put the letter together, we put wording in regarding MAG supporting the ADOT targets. And then, as Kerry mentioned, we do go through and list what we are doing to help support or help to address the increases or help keep going on decreasing the trends. So that's the part that we add and support, and we do add 4 or 5 different bullet parts. Part of it is how we implement our STSP, which this committee has oversight to. So there are several different areas that we include in that letter.
Great, thank you, everyone. With that, is there any final comment or question here before we pick up the action that's on the floor? All right, hearing none. So the action on the floor is to recommend that MAG support the ADOT established 2022 safety performance targets into perpetuity, or until MAG should deem it necessary to establish and adopt their own targets. So do I have a motion? I do not hear a motion yet. Anybody?
This is David Smith with the City of Scottsdale. I motion to approve the action.
All right, thank you, David. Do I have the needed second?
Chris, all seconds.
Thank you, sir. All right, so it sounds like we have the motion and seconded. So I'll call for a vote on the motion. Margaret, if we could run through the roll call, please. Those in favor say aye, and those opposed say nay, and abstain if you feel free to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members of the Transportation Safety Committee, yes, please unmute and indicate your vote when I call your name. Carrie Wilcoxon.
I should probably abstain from this.
Thank you. Shane Kiso.
Aye.
Ward Stanford. Ward Stanford. John Willett.
Aye.
Raymond Hong.
Aye.
Nick Russo. Chris Salas.
Aye.
Aaron Pinkerton.
Aye.
Tony Abbo.
Aye.
Matthew Reed.
Aye.
Woody Scouten. Rodolfo Lopez.
Aye.
Maza Muradovich.
Aye.
Ryan Hudson.
Aye.
Tara Harmon. Mohammed Youssef.
Aye.
David Smith.
Aye.
Dana Asiani.
Aye.
Kathy Hollow.
Aye.
Adrian Ruiz. Jeff King. Robert Gray. Captain David Cates. Alberto Gutier. Mr. Chair, the motion passes with one abstention.
All right, thank you all. Thank you, everybody, for that discussion. And thank you, Carrie, for jumping in on that presentation. You did very, very well. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item 7. Not an unusual one for us. Top 100 list of intersections ranked by crash risk 2016 through 2020. The MEG network screening methodology for intersections was developed and adopted by committee in January 2010 with a modification to the crash risk formula adopted in 2014. The application of this methodology for the most recent 5 years of intersection crash data, 2016 to 2020, produced a complete list of over 23,000 crash sites across the entire MEG region ranked by crash risk. MEG transportation engineer Mohammed Shaheed will provide presentation on this year's top 100 list and next steps as it relates to identifying the next round of roadway safety assessment locations. Mohammed?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the Transportation Safety Committee. So as you know, this is the new top 100 intersection list using data for the latest 5 years from 2016 to the latest available 2020 data for the MEG region. Just some highlights for the latest top 100 locations that we found. 12% of the top 100 as new locations in the list, and 88% were already on the previous list of the top 100 when we are using data for the previous latest 5 years spanning from 2015 to 2019. Of the 88% of the previous locations, we found that 50% ranked higher compared to the previous list, 48% ranked lower, and 2% remain unchanged, as you can see on the donut in the presentation slide. We noticed that the greatest increase in the ranking was from a location of 189, which was based on 2015 to 2019, and outside of top 100, basically ranked 64 in the 2016 to 2020 ranking list. And the greatest drop in ranking was from number 13 based on the 2015 to 2019 to number 76 to this year's intersection list. Also, we would like to note that, publication of the MAC top 100 intersection list triggers a number of activities related to MAC safety program, such as RSS candidate locations, local agency safety studies, generation of the list for the local agencies also. So as we are presenting the overall, highlights of the latest top 100 list here, going forward, MAG will be considering to report on tracking of some of the locations of the top 100 list in terms of funding through MAG programs, safety performance, and what safety mitigation countermeasures implemented at some of the locations in the top 100 list. Next slide, please. So just a review of the top 50 and top 10 of this year's list. As you see, when we compare the current top 50 with the previous year's list, we see that all top 50 currently in the top 100 were also in the previous top 50. 30 basically ranked higher, 28 lower, and 2 remain unchanged compared to the previous list. And when we compare the top 10 with the previous year's list, we find that 9 of the locations were also in the previous top 10 list. 5 ranked higher, 3 ranked lower, and 2 basically remain unchanged. These 2 are basically in the top 10, as previously mentioned in the top 50 also. And 1 from basically top 20, now in top 10. The top 20 in the previous list now came into the top 10 list of the current ranking. Next slide, please. So our next step is that, after today's meeting, we will, post this to the MAG webpage along with the maps of the locations of the ranked intersections, and then we'll convene the RSA working group meeting to find out what are the best locations based on the latest ranking list to conduct RSAs for intersections and corridors, which is basically the data-driven method for the 2022 RSA locations and corridors. And obviously, agencies can request their list for intersections in their jurisdiction using this latest 5 years of data that we have conducted our analysis on. With that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Jade, any questions from the committee members?
This is Chris Allis, Town of Florence. I have a question. You obviously provided some analytics to the previous year, but what about 2 years and 5 years previously? Where are those top 50 intersections? Are those 50 there 2 years ago, 5 years ago?
Sure. Thank you for that's a very good question. So basically, we have information available, and we basically do each year a comparison of the current list ranking with the previous 3 up to 3 to 4 years. Basically, when we do convene a working group meeting, we present that information to the group to let them know how the locations they're considering for funding for RSAs are behaving over the course of years by considering each of the 5 years ranking. So we do have that information readily available. If you would like to have access to that information, you can request that to us. I'll be happy to provide that information. But yes, we consider those information at least 3 years of previous network screening results when we discuss about considering RSA candidate locations in the working group meeting.
All right, any other further questions for discussion before we move on? Hearing none. Thank you, Mohammed. All right, we'll move on to the next item. Next item is number 8. Adot Safe Routes to School Road Safety Assessments. This item is on the agenda for information. The Adot Traffic Safety Road Safety Assessment, RSA program has begun offering safe routes to school road safety assessments to interested regional and local public agencies. Adot Safe Routes to School Program RSA Program Manager Bahram Jorgish will provide a brief presentation on the Safe Routes to School RSA program. So Bahram, are you connected with us?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair and the members of the committee. Bahram Jorgish with Traffic Safety. I think I have a short presentation on what we've been working and what we have started a process of offering Safe Route School, and just wanted, before I get to this slide, just wanted briefly to let everyone know we have sort of provided a 2-page flyer on the sort of direction and guidance for the schools and local municipalities when they need help to sort of, and all the resources that, it's listed on that. So that will be posted in Adot website shortly by the end of this month or October. And what, in addition, what we are looking at is to sort of create a website, or have a link or a website so that anybody who is types in Safe Route School, that's one of the, it sort of has a link to the Adot RSA program that they could sort of have access to it. So next, please. The overall program that we are looking for is to provide general information pointing to school towards existing resources. As I mentioned, in the flyer that we are going to be offering, it has a lot of resources that schools, parents, they could access and guide them through what they could do. Local engineer resources, town, city, MPOs, and COGS. Also, we could provide supplemental guidance, reviews for schools and communities. And these are only guidance as needed, needed upon request. And I think at the end of my slide, I have the information on how schools or municipalities, schools basically, they could reach out to Adot, myself, and then we'll assist them. Next slide, please. Yeah, as I mentioned, that we provide resources to schools. These are we are looking at in the initial point is for schools to sort of do a self-assessment of their routes, basically or specifically walking and bicycling routes to school. Provide information to parents, drivers, schools, resource officers, and local public agencies. Also provide typical issue and solutions upon request when self-assessment is performed. And the review of school routes to identify safety issues, barriers, and mitigating those concerns upon request. And I think this is going to be part of, we do this part of the Adot internal RSA program. And the other locations reviewed by local agencies or consultants, possibly through RSA program. What we're looking also is that we could sort of, as I said in our flyers, there are a lot of resources that we have listed that it could be used. Next slide, please. So the request for school-related RSAs is, if they, after we sort of publish the flyers or put it in our website, this is the contact information. They could contact me, and we have the website azrsa@azdot.gov. they could send a request through that email address, and we'll take a look at it. We are when we get a request for additional guidance, we sort of go through a ranking process. We rank the request first to see. I mean, it depends on the school student population, and we have few categories that we're gonna sort of do a short list or ranking of the request, and then we take the highest ranking and we proceed with it. So that's why we want to make sure that we are sort of serving the needed schools, which is a priority to them. So with that, if there are any questions, I'll be glad to respond.
Thank you, Bahram. Good stuff. Any questions from the committee? All right. Hearing none, thank you. We'll move on. Thank you for that information, Bahram.
Thank you, the chair and the members of the committee. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Margaret, I think at this point, do we have time to jump back to the program manager's report, item number 4?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I can also compress my information so that we can give members of the committee an opportunity to provide some updates of their own. But yes, I will go back to there. So yeah, so quickly run through some of these. As you may remember, we had crossing guard training workshops this year virtually again for the second year. We had 2 sessions this year, which is a little bit different than what we did last year. We had a morning session and an afternoon session. You can see the number of attendees here. Just to give you a little bit of context, when we were in person doing these trainings, we were getting somewhere around 450 attendees total at the 3 different sites. So we had some really good attendance this year. One of the things that is really needing some attention right now is we need to really beef up our planning team activities and those of you who represent the team. We've had we've had several retirements over the past 5 or 6 years. One notably this year, Don Cross will be retiring in October. He was a very big player, was very active in the planning team, did a lot of the training, helped us come up with scripts for the Guardians of the Future video. We also had some promotions. For instance, Brandon Foray has been promoted within the city of Peoria, and so his time is really needed in other areas for the city of Peoria. So we really need to do some outreach. MAG staff is developing a fact sheet right now, just to kind of outline, the importance of the training, how many guards were able to train, kind of what it takes to do that, the kind of person that we are looking for to recruit. And we'll be sending that out to with an email to this committee, as well as if we have, obviously we have a lot of member agencies that don't have representation on this committee. We'll be working to do that outreach through our intergovernmental representatives. So just really quickly on some of the project updates, we're looking to finish up the fiscal year 21 road safety assessments here by the end of the year. Those are going to get kicked off here in October to finish those up. Mohammed spoke briefly about the fiscal year 2020 road safety assessments. On the Safe Routes to School studies, those scopes have been distributed and concurrence obtained from local agencies and school administrations. And we anticipate authorization for funds to get those kicked off in October as well. The Fall See Me AZ pilots began last week and will continue through the next few months. Some of you may have seen the light rail with the See Me AZ graphics train wraps. A press release was sent out last week as well ahead of the fall media push. Chris has provided a radio interview with KTAR, and I've been invited to speak about CME AZ at an Anthem Community Town Hall. So we continue to get requests for the toolkit materials. And I would say we're, gaining some traction and gaining some interest as well. So the near and miss analysis at 10 light rail crossing locations are being conducted through the consultant task orders. Both task orders have been kicked off, and with extensive work to coordinate the drone video collection will soon begin if it has not already on one of those. The phase 1 predictive safety framework work on the MAG region data needs, data gaps, identification, and prioritization is going in full swing. This task also integrating with Adot's effort to come up with a safety score for planning and programming, their P2P effort, which the consultant team is doing. So phase 2 planning is in process as Adot has provided a matrix outlining the pros and cons of predictive safety tools, but yet to decide on a specific one. So related to the task underway for predictive safety phase 1, the consultant team has prepared a brief 6-question survey to assess agencies' data availability, means of collection, and possible sharing. Please look for that survey. We'll be working through intergovernmental representatives again to collect the survey responses from agencies not represented on this committee. Just a quick note, on September 13th, a memo was sent out to request nominations. The memo was also sent to management committee and intergovernmental representatives. So in keeping with the policies and the desire to maintain an east, west, and central balance, we are looking for nominations, or we're encouraging nominations from the West Valley, as our current chair is from Phoenix, and the vice chair is from the East Valley, rotating us back to the west. And just a note to here that those nominations are due by November 1st. So just really quickly for the programming of Safe Routes to School and road safety projects. On October, this coming Friday, any revisions that you received notes on from either Chris or Mohammed on your respective applications are due this Friday if you haven't already turned those in already. In October 1, evaluation begins. October 29th, evaluation sheets are due. And November 16th, and it does say 9 a.m. that needs a correction. We moved that meeting back at another half an hour just so we can make sure to accommodate the time for the transportation safety, or for the committee, for the presentations, as well as the potential committee recommendation. Just a quick note that the RSP, for the RSP, we received 13 applications from 16 local agencies totaling a little over $5.7 million in requested funds. And for Safe Routes to School, we received 3 applications from 2 local agencies totaling about a little over $150,000.
Margaret, sorry for the interruption. Just a revision for the RSP. So we have actually 15 applications from the agency.
Oh, we do. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Mohammed.
Yeah.
Just to note as well that evaluation and recommendation of projects are an important part of this committee's charge, having oversight of these programs. And with that, Mr. Chair, that completes my presentation, and we all switch back now to fast forward to agenda item 9.
All right, thank you, Margaret.
Or 8, my apologies.
I think it's 8. Yes, thank you. So back to item 8 and report by committee members. So at this time, I'd like to invite any members of the Transportation Safety Committee to report on any ongoing safety related projects, activities in their jurisdiction. And I think our usual protocol, Ms. Herrera, is just to read down the roll call list just to make sure we don't miss anybody, if you could do that.
Sure, Mr. Chair, members of the Transportation Safety Committee, when I call your name, feel free to provide a report or just pass it on to the next. Carrie Wilcoxon, any update from Adot?
Yes, Margaret, committee members. This is We're still looking at a HSIP call for projects for January 10th of next year for FY 25 and 26. We're trying to work out some of the details as far as how much we will offer and any kind of changes to the program. But right now it's still looking at the ranking based on benefit cost ratio. And we'll have more details hopefully later this fall.
Thank you, Carrie. Shane Kiso, report from Apache Junction.
No report from AJ at this time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ward Stanford, any update from the City of Avondale?
Nothing here, Margaret.
And by the way, Ward, welcome to the Transportation Safety Committee. We have a new representative from Avondale. Thank you, Ward.
Thank you, Margaret.
John Willett.
No report for Buckeye this month. Thank you.
Thank you. Raymond Huang.
There's no report from China this time.
Okay, thank you. Nick Russo. Chris Salas.
No update.
All right, thank you. Aaron Pinkerton, any update from Gilbert?
No update from Gilbert, but I would want to just kind of give a shout out and thanks to the MAG staff for all their support and with all the grants this round. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. Tony Abbo, report from Glendale. Okay, Matthew Reeg, any report from Goodyear?
Nothing to report, thank you.
All right. Woody Scouten, any report from Litchfield Park? With that, we'll go to Rodolfo Lopez, report from City of Maricopa.
Nothing to report from the City of Maricopa.
Thank you. Mazin Muradovich, any report from Maricopa County?
Yes, I do, Margaret. Thank you. This is Mazin Muradovich with Maricopa County. I have a couple of items, and I'd like to be brief as much as possible. So, Maricopa County recently collaborated with the Federal Highway Administration and co-presented a topic about the focus on reducing rural roadway departure, the Forward Initiative. As referenced in the Federal Highway Safety Office website, roadway departure on the rural roadway network account for 1/3 of the traffic fatality. Statistical data indicate that departure crashes are a major problem in all type of public rural roads. Yet, it is estimated 40% of the traffic fatality occur on local on roadway. McDuff TSM Design and Safety section assembled a poster based on Federal Highway Administration proposed countermeasures to reduce crash severity. The poster included crash type and causes, and also recommended countermeasures that reduces crash severity. Now, this is these crash percentages were adopted from AASHTO Highway Safety Manual and also the CMF Clearinghouse. So it included some of these items, such as slope flattening, centerline rumbles, high friction surface treatment, edge line and shoulder rumbles, edge center barrier, clear zone shoulder whitening, to name a few. So the idea for that session that was presented, it was basically to provide guidance to Maricopa County in-house design group, as well as maybe on-call consultant, and to provide them with guidance and toolbox to emphasize safety elements during scoping and design phase. Poster is available to me, and I will be very happy to share it with any of the safety committee if needed. And it is very, very informative and very straightforward, and have a lot of good ideas that we could use. Another quick update, if I may. I apologize for taking extra time. Is I wanted to have a quick update about the high friction surface treatment the HSIP funded pilot project that was actually implemented on both two locations, Maricopa Road, milepost 16, and also this was depicting horizontal curve condition. Also highway safety, Bush Highway, milepost 32, where we applied it at a condition depicting horizontal curve as well as downgrade. Project was completed on 2020. We are, for us, after study and findings, we continue to obtain high friction coefficient value a year and 6 months out. We really, having done this twice so far since the implementation, and we are getting results close to the 0.9 values, which is really very impressive. On top of that, crashes have dropped on Maricopa Road with only three non-serious crashes that showed up recently. But as far as highway, nothing was reported on Bush Highway, which is pretty impressive. So here briefly, we're going to continue to conduct after studies, including the testing of the friction testing values as well as crash data. The attempt here is to try to work with the stakeholders and the state counterparts to try to maybe implement and establish CMF to utilize the safety performance test for the friction course. And also, on a wishful thinking from my side here is to try to convince our management to pursue this further and apply friction course at this stage to signalized and non-signalized intersection. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mazen.
Thank you.
Ryan Hudson, do you have a report from Mesa?
I'm Margaret. Yes, I do. I just wanted to mention that City of Mesa, we had a transportation bond that passed last November in 2020. So we're kind of in the middle of really working through a lot of the safety projects that were identified as part of that bond package, working through design on several projects that were identified through our network screening tool that we use here and have built over the past handful of years. It's a predictive analysis based on the HSM methodologies. And also over the course of the past couple of years, we've really started to build upon the crash data that we have specifically for fatal, serious injury, and our vulnerable road users, our bikes and pedestrians. We started to use that data and correlate it with other data that we have, such as the population of zero-car households, household density in certain areas, to start really honing in and using local funding mechanisms to start to address some of these really short-term needs to go out and address those as quickly as possible. If anyone on the committee has any questions or feedback or certain situations that are similar to that, I'd love to hear from that, but just wanted to provide that update for Mesa.
Thank you, Ryan. We might be interested in if you're willing to, a presentation at a future meeting regarding your predictive methodology for the city of Mesa.
Yeah, absolutely. Would be happy to do that.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, Tara Harmon, any report for Pinal County? Mohammed Youssef, report for Queen Creek?
Yes, Margaret, a couple of things. We're doing a pilot project with Econolite on Ellsworth Road that we're using the signal optimization software to actually recommend signal timing for us based on the traffic demand, live traffic demand, and we can change signal timing instantly. So far, we see arrival in green is 71%. That's above the Maricopa County average of 64%, and 18% reduction in delay. We probably gonna do that, town-wide. Near future, I'll let Marshall give presentation to the committee if that's possible. I think it's a very promising software, a very promising technology, and it's much easier to change signal timing instead of the traditional way of collecting traffic, and it takes 6 months to a year to retime signal. The second project that we have is We're correcting the negative left turn at Ellsworth Road and Akati Road and extending the left turn pocket there, the storage for left turn. So that's a two project that we have right now. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mohammed. David Smith, any report for Scottsdale?
Yes, thank you. So I just want to first say it's my pleasure. This is my first meeting serving on the safety committee. So it's my pleasure to be serving in that capacity, previously on the streets committee with MAG. I don't have any project updates per se, but I would like to recognize one of the distinguished committee members and welcome the appointment of Carrie Wilcoxon to the City of Scottsdale Transportation Commission. I look forward to the dialogue and the expertise that Carrie brings from a safety perspective. So I just want to make that announcement. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and my apologies for some reason I thought your first meeting was the July meeting. So welcome to the committee.
Thank you.
Dana Asiani, any report for Surprise?
Nothing to report today.
Thank you. Kathy Hollow, report for Tempe?
No, not today. Thanks, Margaret.
All right, thank you. Believe we don't have anybody. Did I forget anybody that would like to give an update? All right, with that, Mr. Chair, I think we can go on to the next agenda item.
All right, item number 9, future agenda items. Do any members of the Transportation Safety Committee have any topics or issues of interest that you may like to have considered for discussion at future meetings? So if you do, feel free to speak up now. All right, I do not hear any, but just as a reminder too, if you think of any items for the future, feel free to, you also could email Ms. Herrera or the chair of this committee, and we will take a look at that. So on to the next item is for our next meeting. And that meeting, as Margaret mentioned in her report, Tuesday, November 16th at 8:30. So I just want to bold that 8:30. Please look at your calendars to try to get that earlier time. You know, that's different than our usual 10 a.m. So it's at 8:30. And it looks like it'll be a virtual meeting. So we look forward to that meeting and hearing the presentations at that meeting. Let's see, we'll move on to adjournment then, I guess. So with the power invested in the chair, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting here today. And it looks like it is adjourning at 11:40. That's Apache Junction time. Appreciate it, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.